start by saying we have to be extraordinarily cautious on the COVID issue. I hope that all of you here and your families are getting vaccinated. I do not need to reinforce the body of scientific evidence which shows that vaccines save lives. We have several people in Guyana now dying from COVID. And even though the unvaccinated in Guyana represent only 30% of our population, 90% of the deaths and hospitalizations are from people who are unvaccinated. So do not listen to people who say that they're going to plant the devil in your body by vaccines. If that's the case, all of us would have had the devil already in us, because we've been taking vaccines from childhood on all sorts of issues. And secondly, some people say they'll plant microchips to track you. You drop down and die as soon as you get vaccines. Every single day, I hear a ton of rumors that are preventing people from taking vaccines. But I hope that you get vaccinated and get your children vaccinated too. We have the Pfizer vaccine here. We had a hard time getting vaccines for our people. The United States of America, Canada, the United Kingdom kept all the vaccines to themselves for a very long period. We tried every single place to get vaccines to even buy for our people. Not only Guyana, but the Caribbean and many countries in Africa. They were shut out completely from getting vaccines. And so we managed with great difficulty to get vaccines from China, from India, from Russia, and fortunately today we have 70% of our people vaccinated. And now we're getting some out of the US, and we're saving those for our children, the Pfizer vaccine. So I hope that all of you will ensure that that happens, that you get vaccinated. It's important for saving lives. Now, since this is the first time I'm here after the elections, and I've deliberately stayed away for the last year for several reasons. One has to do with COVID and not wanting to bring our people together so that we can spread the disease. But now, more and more our people are vaccinated and they've developed some immunities. Secondly, we've spent the last year in trying to lay out the framework for our plans to fulfill the promises we made to you on the campaign trail. And the promises were many. We promised to restore normalcy to our country, to ensure that freedom is a prevailing condition in Guyana, and that is why the fight for democracy was such a crucial one. Secondly, we promised employment for people and to reverse the unconscionable policies of the APNU when they laid bare the entire sugar industry and terminated some 7,000 workers without regard for how they would feed their families, because they are moving from being able to feed families, sending their kids to school, with just being on the road. And if anyone in this country had any doubt that this policy was dictated because of financial reasons or economic reasons, then today that doubt has been indisputably settled. That it had nothing to do with economics, because the $5 billion of subsidy that it took to keep the sugar industry going and saving 7,000 jobs was less than the social impact of laying out or laying off 7,000 people. The untold damage they did to children and their education, and the the moving people who had a fairly decent life into the ranks of the poor. That had enormous social consequences. But it had also financial consequences because 7,000 sugar workers were paying NIS, and then they stopped contributing to NIS and caused difficulties at the NIS. The sugar industry on the East Coast particularly, when they kept the canals going and the investment in cleaning the canals and the sluices also helped to prevent flooding in many of those villages. If you subtract the $2 billion that we spend on drainage and irrigation, you would see that the net subsidy was only $3 billion. But this had nothing to do with economics. It had to do with a vindictive policy because APNU, as this, they were doing this, as Ramjatan said, oh, sugar workers don't vote for us. So they had to decimate the sugar industry with the hope that maybe many people will migrate and they will change the demographics of the country. And they had no plan to keep the industry going. They were progressively starving the industry of funding so that by now, by this year, had they been in office, you would have probably seen more and more closures and eventually the entire industry would have gone. That was their master plan. And so we have had a hard time trying to come to grips with this issue. But let me tell you, I started off by saying what the last year we've been doing. So first of all, it started with that struggle. The struggle to ensure that we all grow up, regardless of who we are, who we voted for, regardless of our race or our religion, that we grow up in a country that is free. And only in a free country can the citizens really make sustainable progress. And so the PNC that stayed in office for 3 decades nearly in the Jagdeo era through rigged elections that many of you are familiar with, the first chance everyone thought they were reformed. In 2015 and 2011, they spoke a good game, how they were the new Democrats. They were in favor of liberalizing the country, that the PPP was a fossilized party, that a party that was corrupt, had no plans, and they were going to expand sugar and bring people together, all people of every race. But the reality was very different. The reality is that the first chance that they got at resuming power after 23 years, people saw it became self-evident to everyone in Guyana and the rest of the world that that party had not changed a bit. They returned to the old bad ways of trying to rig elections to stay in power, instead of working hard to convince people to vote for them. And until today, they still live that fallacy, that fantasy. They have nothing else to argue. When they say in Parliament today, they say the PPP tried to rig the elections. First, they tried to get Bharrat, Scotland, who they appointed the Speaker of Parliament. And they say, oh, it's an Indian thing. Well, Bharrat, Scotland was Afro-Guyanese. And they tried to get him to reverse the no confidence motion. And he said, no, I'm not doing that, because the Constitution of Guyana is quite clear that if you fail on a no confidence motion, you have to hold elections in 3 months. They slowed down the entire process. It wound its way all the way to the CCJ. We had to get the Caribbean Court of Justice. And sometimes they argue that the Caribbean Court of Justice is made up of only people of African descent. Well, the Caribbean Court of Justice is ultimately a professional court. So when that court ruled that they had to pursue the elections, they had to hold elections pursuant to the Constitution because the government fell. They were critical of the judges there, calling them stooges, and we bought them out, the Caribbean Court of Justice. But before that, you recall what they had done by illegally appointing the chairman of the Elections Commission. And we had to go all the way to the CCJ to get that reversed too. So the elections were held. And isn't it funny that today only APNU believes that the PPP lost the elections? Only a few people in APNU, not even their supporters, because the CCJ ruled against them. The Chief Justice of Guyana, Robson George, ruled against them. The High Court, the Court of Appeal in Guyana ruled against them. The Commonwealth believed they lost the elections. The Organization of American States, the Carter Center, CARICOM, which led the recount, they said, oh, Ranger said, they're the best interlocutors. We want CARICOM to come and supervise the recount because they didn't want the Carter Center to come. And when CARICOM said that it was all they were coming up with was a fantasy, and that the election, the recount must be used to declare the elections, they started criticizing Nia Motley and Ralph Gonsalves and many of the other leaders of the CARICOM, Owen Otter, Bruce Golding. But these are Afro-Caribbean people who are principled. They didn't make it a race issue. This was about freedom and democracy in the country. And so we had to fight in that period to win at all costs. Because had we failed then, there was no future for this country. And we would have been already the United States, everyone, they were going to sanction Guyana. And when sanctions hit, like what happened in Venezuela, people starved. Unfortunately, even the people who are not responsible, they really get hurt the most. And so in those 5 months, we had to battle every attempt to steal the elections. In the period, in the 5 years, they spent $1.1 trillion. And look at what we have to show for 5 years after spending $1.1 trillion Guyana dollars with that's over $5 billion US. In the period from the no confidence vote, they spent to elections, they spent $419.5 billion. That's over $2 billion US without any parliamentary oversight. Massive spendings and nothing. What policies did they pursue? In the period in 5 years, although they spent all that money, the infrastructure of the country did not progress. The infrastructure, they put in not a single new power plant. Not a single new power plant was put in the country. So power was not there. The roads that they built, the East Coast and West Coast Road that you see paved, were projects that we left behind on Cherry Street. What other infrastructure? The healthcare deteriorated. Berbicians, everywhere else, shortages of drugs once more. And on the taxation side, they put tax on water, the VAT, on electricity, on machinery and equipment, on medical services, on travel. They increased the DNI charges and land rental sometimes by 500%. They removed the subsidy to the pensioners. They removed the 10,000 school kids grant. All of these happened in that period. More tax burden, 40,000 people lost their jobs, of which 7,000 were in the sugar industry alone. That is their legacy. And so when a party has a very limited legacy, a list of accomplishments, because in the 28 years, they didn't have that when they ran Guyana from 64 to 1992. What was the situation in 1992 for the older folks here? It was, the country was poorer than Haiti. The Caribbean Council of Churches came here and found that in a fact-finding mission. 2, we had the highest debt in the world on a per capita basis, and in terms of percentage of revenue used to service debt. Many of our people fled the country. There was no freedom. The infrastructure was destroyed. So no legacy from the 28 years. Many of our people became poor. The devaluation wiped out our public service. Teachers, policemen, nurses were in the middle class. When the devaluation came in the 80s and 90s, what happened? Their salary moved from maybe $200-300 US a month to $25 US a month by 1992, because the exchange rate was 125 at that time, and the minimum wage was about 3,000 Guyana dollars. That was their legacy. And then in the 5 years again, they got resume office, the same legacy of failure, no planning for the future. And this is not only for PPP strongholds, this is for the country. We always argue every community made progress under the PPP. Look at Linden, a stronghold of PPP. If you go to Linden, you'll see almost everything that you can touch here. The new housing schemes, Amelia Ward or Block 22 or hospitals, all were built under the PPP. That Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, every race made progress, because that's the type of party we operate. It comes with a Chedi Jagan legacy. And if you cannot run this country for one set of people alone, you have to run it for all of our people of every race. And that is why the PPP made so much progress and will continue to do so. So they had no track record. We had the tragedy of it in the last year is that the first thing we were struck with when we got into office was how to deal with COVID. They had, in the 5 months before, they had shut down the entire country. And we recognize you cannot shut down a country. In countries that were shut down totally, their death rates are higher than ours. Trinidad and Tobago, many of the Caribbean countries. The United States at one time had a per capita death of 3 times, although they had more medicine and everything else than us, better hospitals. They have 3 times more debt than we have on a per capita basis. But we opened up our economy and we built the capability for testing, ICU, and everything else so that we can take care of more people should they develop the more extreme form of the illness. That is the first big challenge. We had to spend a lot of money on vaccines, etc., because it slowed down the rollout of our plan, especially on employment. Even now, the employment situation, we managed to get many more people who were unemployed when we were in opposition or in the COVID period, but we still are far away from getting where we want to be. Secondly, in the last year, we have had to deal with $93 billion of debt that they borrowed from the central bank. We had to address that. We had to address that there was a situation where there was no plan for the future, not for the oil and gas sector, nor in healthcare or education, nor for infrastructure, basic infrastructure, because they had utilized almost all the projects we had put in place in the pre-2015 era. So the last year, we have had to deal with that. We have had to deal with floods that ravaged part of our country. And we have had to deal with a chronic shortage of drugs in the health system. So let me quickly tell you how we have addressed this. In the first 4 weeks after we got into office, in August, we presented a budget. The first time in our history in such a short period, we managed to prepare a budget. The normal cycle is 6 months. When I met with the staff first, they told me 6 months. And I said, in 4 weeks, we're going to table a budget. Because we did not have a budget for 2.5 years before that. It was since November of 2018 that the last budget was passed, and they were spending money without budgetary approval, wantonly. And so in the first budget that we put in place, what happened? We kept many of the promises that we said we will keep, that we put in our manifesto. We removed all the taxes on water, electricity, food items. We reversed all the taxes on land charges, the lease rates for land and water charges. We cut the 200 tax items that they had, additional tax items and fees. We cut them by 50% that they had increased. We restored the free water to the pensioners. We returned water subsidy to the pensioners. We said that from 2021 that we will increase the old age pension by 25%. Remember, we had promised to double the old age pension in 5 years, and we will do that. The old age pension was $20,000. We said it will be $40,000 in this term in office per month for the old age pensioners. In the first year, we increased it by 25%. We restored the children grant. They're taking it away and arguing they couldn't afford it. It was $10,000. When they took it away, we put it to $15,000. We doubled the school uniform grant to school children. And we plan to get it, we said in 5 years, it's going to be $250,000 dollars per child per year to get it up from 0 on the APNU. It was 10,000 before. We plan to get that done. We said we're going to do 20,000 scholarships in this term in office. We've already given out 6,000 scholarships in the first year. We said free university education in the 5 years, and we're working on that. So we put $14 billion back into sugar, or else sugar would have been shut down. All the estates they were planning to shut down the remaining estates, we put $14 billion. This is all in the first year in office. We've had to do supplementary provisions. I was just explaining to one meeting that when they told us we had adequate drugs in the system. And when we're saying they presented a report, why is it that they have shortages right across the country if you have adequate drugs in the bond, medical supplies? So we then did an assessment. We ordered an assessment. When they completed, it was $15 million of drugs that had expired, some that were bought in the PPP era before 2015. So it showed that the stocks, we had all the stocks, but in reality, it was a different story. We had to destroy all of those. When we destroyed that, it meant we only had about 30% of the supplies. I'm told we're now back to about 85, 90% of the supplies, and we have to do a bit more. But so even that we had to weigh in on. I can list all of the planning. We've laid out a plan for healthcare in this region. We've just gone for $650 million of supplementary for healthcare in this region, so we can address some of the smaller clinics and some of the issues in the bigger hospitals. But we're going to probably upgrade New Amsterdam significantly, do some investment in Midpoint, and build a new hospital at Skelton. All of these are part of the plan. We've spent a ton of money on infrastructure, roads and stuff, and we plan to put more money in. On the On the flood relief alone, I was just talking about flood relief, we have given out about $8 billion to people who suffered from flood, and most are in this region. On the COVID grant, in Region 6 alone, $25,000 per household. We have spent about $1 billion in this region, but $7 billion across the country. So in the last year, we've been very aggressive. I can't list all of the things that we have done, but we have been busy pushing the program, planning, making sure we're getting help, trying to generate more dynamism in the economy and resources so that we can return people to normalcy. These are all things that have engaged our attention in the last year or so. In terms of employment, we have had a harder time, especially in this region and the outlying areas, in generating employment. Can I get some of that coffee? I need to keep going. So, yeah, thanks. I just need my energy. Yes. Abnu said one of the reasons I'm not coming out is because I have cataract surgery, I have cancer, all sorts of things. No, but we were busy working for the last year. Sometimes they get worried when they don't see me a lot. So I was telling you about the difficulties in employment. What in Region 4 and 3 now is booming because of the oil and gas industry. And just last week, the president and we met with several people who are employing. They need hundreds of people employed, but we're not getting the people to train. And they want people basically from Region 4, maybe closer, and 3. Now, right now, there's an industrialization process in the Demerara River because you have a lot of shore-based facilities being built and industrial areas that require a lot of workers. And we've already started working on the project, the Wales estate where they sent home 2,000 persons from, the sugar estate that they closed. They gave out some of the land and sold off the factory as scrap metal to some of their friends. And so even in Wales, we practically don't have a factory there. But we were converting that now into an industrial area, and we plan to bring the pipeline in by 2024 that will bring the gas in from some of the wells offshore. When that comes in at Wales, we'll be able to generate 250 megawatts of power. That is twice as much as GPL now supplies to the whole country. We'll be able to generate that at a fraction of the cost that we have to by importing diesel and bunker C. So we plan to cut in the electricity price by 50%, half of what it is today. So that will be a big benefit to every home in this country because their electricity bill will come down by half. When the pipeline comes in, we'll be able to produce as a byproduct all the cooking gas that we can use in this country. Our 50% share would probably be 3 times what we currently use. So we can lower the price of cooking gas significantly. We have propane here coming in, so we don't have, if we put them in tankers, we probably don't have to import diesel or bunker C to generate power in the hinterland areas and maybe Linden and many other places. We can then ship them out here from our own produced gas. But we'd have another 70 million cubic feet per day of gas coming in, not just the first 250. And that would allow a whole range of industries to develop there. So the jobs are going to flow in that region. We have to find a way to get some people from region 5 and 6 to start working in region 4. They have to start traveling, or you'd have to rent. So how do we plan to do this? We've started identifying people already who are open for training. We want to look at mainly people maybe from 18 to about 45 in the first instance. We're going to convert the Port Bharrat facility training school to a training school, an institute for oil and gas. We plan to move some of the training facilities into the communities, probably in Skeldon and Rosal. Two, to do training in things like welding and stuff. The job, the wages that you earn there could be enough for you to pay the rent for a week. Maybe you can travel home sometimes on weekends and still earn more than you're earning in the other industries, in agriculture sector. So I'm hoping that people in this region, young people, don't think about like how we had a traditional view. They have to look at new industries emerging, where the jobs can go. And this is only in the first phase, because as soon as we already started mapping out the Berbice River here, north of the bridge. So we expect the same thing that's happening in Demerara and regions 3 and 4 will happen in 5 and 6 when we start building these facilities out here. Thousands of jobs coming just here. But if you're already trained with this skill, we need, I'm told, 600 to 700 welders alone to work on the pipeline coming in, the offshore pipeline. So we're going to set up the training programs, and I hope that people here are willing to do that. It wouldn't take very long. In 3-4 months, you can become a certified welder. And there are lots of other areas. So that's the first thing we want to do. In this region also, but in other regions, we're putting in place next year a temporary facility for hiring people so that they can get a few days work a week, maybe 3-4 days work a week, and at least 1,000 persons in this region alone. Three, we're working with other industries. So in Blackbush Boulder, we're working with a factory shell that will buy the produce from the farmers and process them. I met with some people, the aquaculture people. We're looking at growing the swamp shrimp, 150,000 kilograms. That's over 300,000 pounds they're producing now. Our aim is to support them. That will generate hundreds of jobs here in Berbice to go to over 1 million pounds per year. We have to work on a series of initiatives. I'm going to come to sugar a little bit later. There are lots of other areas we're looking to generate employment in. Then we're talking to Suriname because they've discovered some gas on their side and oil too. So I was in Suriname. The president had spoken to President Santoki. I met with him too to see if we can develop the Quarantine River to service the industry offshore, like we do here in Berbice River and also the Demerara River. That will generate more jobs. In the sugar industry itself, we've had a difficult time getting new people because the factories were run down, the cultivations are run down. It takes a number of years to get cane growing. We have lost over 4 billion from the flood in cane, especially the Albion area that we had cane that was flooded. We have employed, as Zulfikar said, nearly 1,000 people back again, and we plan to still invest in sugar. We are looking at getting partners, private sector partners, to work with the government so that we can see resumption of economic activities, not only sugar, but using the industrial base in these areas to see if we can generate new industries that could accommodate the people who are laid off and new young people. So that is going to happen. We want to move the packaging plant from Enmore to Albion, because in Enmore, what we're working on now, and Enmore Fowles Enterprise, the Buxton area, we're looking at setting up some industrial facilities there, like industrial estates. We're currently working on that. Civil works will start there very soon to accommodate the workers who are laid off in the Demerara estates. So there are lots of things that we're working on. It's not easy, it costs a lot of money, and particularly in this period, it's harder to get investors. People don't want to work too much. But I promise, and many times, like I come here today, and the moment I leave, they're gonna go and say, Jagdeo only looking after sugar. And the public service unions, the public service union, and APNU will come out and say, oh, it's racism. Well, in the sugar belt, in the last 5 years, the sugar workers got, as public sector employees, 0 for the last 5 years. Every year on the APNU, after they promised 20% per annum, they got 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 5 years. No salary increase. They like to boast how the public service got 70% increase in the 5 years. Nobody was talking about racism, or nobody was talking about unfair treatment at that time. Not a single person. When they destroyed the API and they were aimed to shut down the industry, nobody talks about it. Well, we don't forget easily our promises. And I came in right here in Canjie, and I spoke with many people. The party tried to keep people going. As opposition leader, I stood there, and many times people would come. Their whole lives were destroyed when they lost their jobs so suddenly. And so I said, we will assist, and we are putting the resources in, as we said. But we have made it clear that those who are laid off, whether you're re-employed or not, I just said to the workers at Skeldon that each of the 7,000 workers who were severed will get $250,000 each. Whether you got back a job or not, it doesn't matter. Because I remember what happened when they didn't want to pay the severance. And Holder said, oh, if you give the workers their severance, they would spend it all out. Well, it wasn't his money. People had earned that after toiling as many as 20, 25 years in the industry. That's what they earned. It wasn't his goodwill. It wasn't his benevolence or charity. They had earned that. And yet, that was their attitude. I remember standing up with the workers from Wales, outside of Parliament, when they refused to pay them their severance, and people's families were being destroyed. We have had a history in the PPP, even when we have had to sever people. You recall in Diamond, they had closed their estate under the PNC, but you had about 300 people working in the cultivations, and then it became hard to move the cane from the East Bank to the East Coast to grind. I sat as president with the workers. We worked with GAU to try to place people elsewhere and to assist them with their severance. This is what our approach. So today, the 7,000 workers, it will cost us about $1.8 billion. But we made a promise in the pre-election period, and we intend to fulfill every single promise that we have made. And not only in this area, but every other area. And I hear a lot of people sometimes, oh, why are you bringing in the pipeline? Why do you want cheaper electricity? How did they pontificate in Georgetown? Because many of them don't even come beyond the boundaries of Georgetown. Some civil society members too, deciding on whether it's our facility offshore will cause climate change globally. It's such a stupid thing that they talk, because only an ignorant person would say that sort of thing, but they pass themselves off as experts. Slow down everything. But we have never, the People's Progressive Party has never been daunted or deterred by criticisms if we know that they're in the interest of the people of this country. When we built the Hope Canal that they all criticized, we did it in spite of what they said. And had we not built it, then the whole of the Marara, including Georgetown, would have been under floodwaters the last flood season. And when we built the Marriott, they said we own the Marriott, Jagdeo own the Marriott, and it's a white elephant. Today it's the most profitable Marriott in any part of the world, one of the most profitable ones. When we started to build back the new airport, we had a spanking new building. They should have pulled down the entire terminal. APNU came in corruptly, changed the project to a rehabilitation project. We're very upset with it. We said to the Chinese contractor, we're not accepting that. And now they have to do remedial work, but we missed the opportunity of a spanking new terminal. They stopped the hydro. We've just retendered for the hydro. We have to work at development. They have done nothing, but they criticize. Only, don't do this, don't do that. But when they were there, now Patterson has become the expert on gas to energy. And he was, for 5 years, they were trying, they should have actually said where the pipeline should have landed. They were trying to land the pipeline where they were buying up some land, some Apnu people, so that they will benefit from it. That is why the country never made any progress. So I'm not too worried about them. We have to work very hard to ensure the promises are fulfilled, the sugar workers and all other persons, regardless of who they supported in the last elections, regardless of their race, that they and their children also progress in this country. That's the only way we will have a sustainable future. And that's what something that the party believes in. The party that I head believes in that. That is why our plans are always national plans. And we have been able to implement these. So today, I just wanted you to understand that Berbice and all of these areas are not going to be neglected. From time to time, I hear the griping, like the flood relief. You know, we get the blame all the time. You have 60,000 people we're trying to help by putting aside 8 billion. And then you have a lot of unscrupulous people who didn't lose anything, they put their names down. And some of them who should have gotten, people who should have gotten, their names are not here. And how do I sit in Georgetown or Fanali sits there and decide how 60,000 people will get it? Because you rely on people to supply the information. And then we get blamed for it all the time. We hired people to look out for our interests, to verify it. So I told them, on this trip, I don't want to hear any more about this. We're going to put in place a mechanism. We're going to put in place a mechanism for the next month. Those who did not get, who had losses, they can come and register, and we'll verify it. And for those, I don't want them to complain that this man got and he shouldn't get it. You bring the names to us too, and we'll investigate those. So that is how we will deal with it for the next month. Because we, through good intention, we wanted to get this done. But who gets the blame? It's the party and the government. And it's a lot of unscrupulous people who shouldn't do this. The same thing with the COVID grant. We go to some houses, 3-4 families want it. That's why we said 1 per household, so we could check the households. and then the pink slip to follow up on. But imagine we had to go to every home across Guyana. Every single home we had to go to. My sister complained. She said, I didn't get my stuff. And so I said, why? She said she wasn't home. So I said, you can't blame me, you weren't home. She wants it now. But I said, it's past. But if you had the pink slip, then I can verify it, check it. If you're home and you got that. So a lot of these things, we're trying to put in place arrangements, but often it's the people who destroy the system because you have unscrupulous people. So I hope that all of you would help to ensure that that doesn't happen too. That doesn't happen. But you know, every time money is being shared, this is a big issue. We always have this. And because it's so many people, you can't really verify it. But we'll continue to help. We can't let a few bad examples deter us from helping others. And so we have to keep improving the system. So today I came out here largely to talk to you in Canjie, not dealing with too many other matters, just to tell you that we're not forgotten. There are lots of opportunities for employment that will be coming out. I want you to make full use of all of these training opportunities, the expansion of the sugar industry through other areas, and this grant. I wanted to talk. I mainly asked the sugar workers who were laid off to come here today because I'd spoken with them before the elections so that they know we didn't forget them too, those who were severed. But I appreciate all of you being here today, and we'll continue coming out. We don't get to come out so often because we don't want, to bring too many people together, but that will change as we open up the country. We're getting closer and closer in the future to herd immunity. As soon as we get our children vaccinated and we can encourage the 30% others, our brothers and sisters, to take the vaccine, then we'll be able to open up the country a bit more and go about normal way of doing things. So thank you for coming here today. I'll come back again. You'll hear more from us. Thank you very much. Let me say, generally I like to mingle with people and talk to them and listen to them. But I don't want people today, because of COVID, to come, so I can't